Durand Union Station is one of America's most beloved railway stations. Located in its namesake city about 60 miles northwest of Detroit, the building stands at perhaps the greatest railroad crossroads in the state of Michigan. Historically playing host to upwards of 3,000 passengers and 130 trains per day, her glory has faded but is still home to numerous trains on numerous lines. Come with us as we spend a day on her platforms, taking in a day in the life of Durand Union Station. The day begins with Amtrak's westbound Bluewater, train number 365. Historically, this building hosted nearly 4 dozen passenger trains each day, handling at times more passengers in 24 hours than residents in the city. Already 81 miles into their journey from Port Huron to Chicago, they're rolling in 10 minutes ahead of schedule. After killing off the extra time, they're ready to add another successful departure to the train sheet when something goes wrong. Not 200 feet from where they started, a hot bearing alarm has forced a ground inspection. After finding nothing out of the ordinary, they check the car logs to find numerous other false heat alarms on the very same car. With permission from the Canadian National Dispatcher, they're finally underway for Chicago, but are now running almost 30 minutes late. Durand is by any definition a railroad town, with lines historically splitting off in 7 directions. This is what Durand looked like in 1922, with the predecessor lines highlighted. By 1890, the Grand Trunk had taken control of Durand except for the Ann Arbor, who continued to run on their own track, passing east of the station and then crossing the Grand Trunk at a location known by the Ann Arbor as Emergency. Today, Durand has seen its share of rationalization, though all of the original routes continue to pass through. The biggest change was the 1974 consolidation of the Ann Arbor main line onto the rails of the Grand Trunk between Pitt Junction and Owasso. The two previously had parallel lines, so the redundant Ann Arbor was abandoned, with trains using the Grand Trunk. This eliminated the diamond at Emergency and trackage on the east side of the station. In 1987, The Grand Trunk sold the former Detroit and Milwaukee, northwest of Durand, as well as the entire CS&M to the newly formed Central Michigan Railroad. Over time, the CMGN wound up selling or abandoning most of the line to Grand Haven and Muskegon, which now exists as 4 segments under 4 different owners, traveling only as far as Owasso from Durand. In 2004, the Central Michigan was bought out by Rail America's Huron and Eastern, which in turn was acquired through merger by Genesee and Wyoming. The Annie, after several ownership changes, is now the Great Lakes Central, which operates all that remains of the original Ann Arbor, except south of Ann Arbor, which is now controlled by the New Ann Arbor Railroad, a subsidiary of Watco. An hour after Amtrak's departure, we get our first CN freight of the day, hustling westbound on the number 2 main with SD75I number 5715 in the lead. "90 minutes later, BNSF Light Power pounds the diamonds on their way eastward to Flint. We will see this train again later as they return with local traffic for Durand and pick up a coal train. Meeting the Light Power is a track inspector, high railing west down the number 1 main. He slows to roll over the diamond, which is a one-way, low-speed design. Five minutes later at 10:30, an eastbound powered by a pair of SD70M-2s rolls through.
Supervisor Brigade 2, signal maintainer Joel Duncan, GT channel 1, over. Yes, sir, you get done doing what you're doing down there. Up here in China. Over. 42 east, over. Answering, over. Guys look good by Durand with marker in place, over. Yeah, thanks. And 8412. CN signal supervisor, we got out. CN 408, CNE 842, over. Turn over. That train looks good, both side markers in place, over. And 8412.
At the time of our visit in June of 2015, CN workers were busy finalizing the new signal system, with plans to cut over to the new system on the 26th of July. The eastbound and westbound home signals on the Flint sub will become simple 3-head masts, replacing the older cantilever-type signals. Meanwhile, the hardware south of the interlocking on the Holly sub is being replaced with another 3-head mast on the main, with a 2-head mast replacing the former dwarf on the siding. To the north, the dwarf that marks the beginning of CN territory will become a 2-headed mast. And finally, the prominent new signals just west of the depot. With a cantilever on the mains and masts on the WWII, the setup is intriguing as a departure from the old setup, with reasoning for this change still unclear. At the very least, it will make train watching easier with more heads-up time for westbounds. Two and a half hours after the last train, a western coal train breaks the midday lull. Rounding the WWII onto the Holly sub is C766, en route to the Consumers Energy Whiting plant in Erie, just south of Detroit. "18,000 tons of train makes a whole lot of noise on the connector before clearing up and commencing the run down to Detroit on one of Michigan's oldest mainlines. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the wind has picked up considerably following the morning showers. Huron and Eastern Train 701 is coming into Durand, which requires them to take headroom around the Y and onto the Flint sub. The two latest generations of corporate ownership are represented today as Power, with the 3865 and 3866 wearing Rail America's red, white, and blue scheme, while the 3034 is adorned in the obligatory Genesee and Wyoming orange. They are soon buried in the Durand yard, working on assembling their outbound train. 20 minutes later, at 2:30 in the afternoon, another eastbound Canadian National manifest rolls through town, led by another SD-75I. While the Huron and Eastern is working on their air test, this short manifest came up the Holly and is working the WWII onto the Flint sub.
Hello. Go ahead, Ed. Go ahead.
As the clock tower chimes out the 4 o'clock hour, the Huron and Eastern, now designated as train number 702, begins their reverse departure move on the Port Huron Y. At the same time, the BNSF light power we saw earlier has returned, with 7 cars of mixed freight for Durand. They meet at the east home signals, with the local peeling away down the highway. The local would have to wait for their turn into the yard, though, with the Huron and Eastern not yet out of the way. After lining the way back towards Saginaw, they finally get going. With the short line out of the way, the CN crew doesn't waste any time getting into the yard. They pass over the aging one-way low-speed diamond, which no longer lifts the wheel tread clear of the rails, leading to a tremendous amount of noise and vibration. After exchanging their mixed traffic for an empty coal train from the Huron and Eastern, they're ready to go again. In order to depart westward, they must pull down the Holly, shove around the highway, and only then can they head for BNSF in Chicago. With the conductor on point, they begin their reverse move, passing the entrance to the station en route. Finally, they're moving out, but they aren't in any hurry as the dispatcher has alerted them to an impending meet at Bancroft, the west end of double track from Durand. The opposing train was L502, a daily Battle Creek to Toledo road switcher. They're soon coming around the Y, with 21 cars to set out in the yard. With nothing for them to pick up, they're outbound in a jiffy, heading back to the rest of their train. While L502 was putting their train back together west of the interlocking, another coal train arrived, this time loads for the Huron and Eastern, symboled C764. To get them into the yard, they're run down the number 1 main around L502, out towards East Durand to reverse around the Port Huron Y. Following right behind the coal train was an eastbound manifest who locked L502 in the number 2 main as they were run around the coal train by the depot.
That is correct. Correctly, 2016 2001 LRM.
With everything clear, L502 receives their light and makes the turn for Detroit. Simultaneously, the inbound train backs around the Port Huron Y into the setting sun. Earlier in the evening, the Great Lakes Central turn to Ann Arbor had arrived in Durand, but became trapped in the yard by L502 and C764. Now, with the railroad finally clear, they take their turn, rolling south onto the Holly sub for a brief run to Pitt Junction, where they will return to home rails. While much of their train is for the new Ann Arbor, they also have significant traffic tonight for the CSX interchange near Howell. Interestingly, Durand witnessed the last passenger train in the country to be pulled by steam when two sections of train number 21 from Detroit arrived on March 27, 1960. 14 hours after the westbound Blue Water departed, eastbound counterpart number 364 is arriving in Durand. 30 minutes off schedule, 364 has 16 passengers to the train tonight, a far cry from the town's heyday as a railroad hub, with trains departing to all major Michigan cities from the same small town. As Amtrak pulls out, they faced a stop indication at East Durand. A westbound freight has been cleared down the single track from Flint and has not yet come into view. Thankfully, the train was just a few minutes out, rolling by the platform less than 10 minutes after Amtrak departed. After the westbound cleared, the distinct ring of two different horns flew through the calm air. After the meet near Vernon, the eastbound comes rolling through, with the C40-8M and SD60F leading as the clock tower chimes 10. As the very last car clears, it reveals the coal train power from earlier is getting underway. They're set to follow the manifest to Flint, where they'll tie up a day's work complete. But for other crews, the day is not done, as trains will continue rolling by all night long, beginning yet another day in the illustrious history of Durand Union Station. Thanks for watching this presentation of the Thornapple River Rail series. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more quality railroading content. Special thanks to the Durand Union Station Incorporated and the City of Durand for making this area such a nice place to watch trains. Copyright 2015, all rights reserved.